Boogie Cousins, I'm happy for him. I'm happy for him only from the standpoint that he's back in the league. He's going to be healthy. We know this is a guy that averaged 28 a game when he was in Sacramento and then New Orleans. We know what he can do when healthy. Last couple of seasons, he's had a string of bad luck, but he can play. I don't know if Houston's the ideal matchup, particularly with James Harden there, considering their style of play. I don't think Boogie fits into that personally. That's just me. But having said all of that, it doesn't matter. If you're James Harden, you need to want to go to Brooklyn for one reason above all else: your shot at the title. It ain't in Houston. You got no shot. They're not beating the Lakers. They're not beating the Clippers. They probably wouldn't beat Denver or Dallas. That's the way I look at it, okay? And even though Philadelphia would be a possibility and an option, they're still relatively young at certain positions. You're James Harden. I think with what the Lakers have put together in terms of Anthony Davis expected to re-sign, LeBron still being there, Morris still there, then you acquired Marc Gasol and Montrezl Harrell, okay, and Schrader. The bottom line is when you look at the Los Angeles Lakers, they are better than they were when they won the championship last month. It's just that simple. And when you look at it from that perspective, what's your best shot to go after them? To assemble a big three, a Kyrie, KD with James Harden, because you're certainly not going to beat them in the interior. You got to bring them outside and destroy them in that fashion, pushing the ball up the court and shooting perimeter shots. That's your only shot to beat this Los Angeles Lakers squad, and there's only one team that could do it. That would be Brooklyn if James Harden were there. Not to mention the fact that, let's call this what it is, Max, Kevin Durant, you know how I feel about him. You know what I think about him. Best of the world. I think he's that lethal. Probably the greatest offensive scorer we've ever seen in our lifetime. Let me be very, very clear with what I'm about to say. He's on the clock. Kevin Durant is on the clock. You were injured last year. We all know that. I believe you'll average 27 in your sleep. We know that. We know what KD can do. But LeBron has reemerged. He actually, instead of being called King James, he is King James, because he's the one wearing the crown as we speak. And we all know that before KD went to Golden State, LeBron went to Miami. And LeBron has preceded KD in a lot of moves. And KD wanted to sit up there and find his own juggernaut, got himself back-to-back chips, would have had his own three-peat had he not gotten injured, because Kawhi Leonard and Toronto wouldn't have had a snowball's chance in hell of beating Golden State. But with all of that said, now that Kevin Durant sat out last season, you talking about coming back, you in Brooklyn, New York. This is the Mecca, New York, okay? I don't give a damn if it's Brooklyn as opposed to Manhattan. It's one of the 5 boroughs. It's New York, baby, okay? We expect stuff up in here. And not to say that the Knicks have given us any reason to, because we know better. I'm just talking about that microscopic eye that descends down upon you, monitoring everything you do and what it takes. If you're Kevin Durant with Kyrie and you don't have any kind of championship, at least contention to show for it, you got a problem. And if you James Harden, you certainly need that yourself. James Harden, because of the Lakers, should be trying to get to Brooklyn now more than ever before. And Max, as an aside, I'm hearing nobody's really calling Houston right now about James Harden. Nothing is going on. The Houston Rockets are expecting James Harden to remain in Houston as of this moment. It could change in a matter of hours. You know how this goes. But they're expecting him to stay in Houston because nobody is calling them for James Harden as we speak. Brooklyn needs to change. They need to get on the phone with Houston.
Houston knows they have to trade Harden. They know they're going to trade Harden. If, in fact, they're not getting calls, and that's because no one's going to bite on a Harden trade when they know he's going to go to Brooklyn. And I would love to see him in Brooklyn. Stephen A., I think not only when you say, you don't have to say like Brooklyn's one of the 5 boroughs even though it's not Manhattan. Brooklyn rings more bells around the world culturally, as a sexy kind of location than Manhattan does or than any place in New York does. I was born in the Bronx. You're from Queens. But, there are people named Brooklyn all around the world, right? And that borough is thirsty for a title, for a major league franchise to win a title. Hasn't had one since 1955 with the Brooklyn Dodgers. And New York is thirsty for a title. Hasn't had one since 73 with the Knicks, or if you count the ABA, 76 with the Nets when they were in Long Island. So I'd love to see Harden on the Nets. And I think your point about the Lakers is a very good one. They've reloaded better than last year. Boy, you better be on a super team. But the thing about joining Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, strictly from James Harden's point of view, if the point is to get credit for winning a championship, he ain't going to be the best player on that team. And people are going to say, well, you were supposed to get out of the East. Well, when we measure it up, AD and LeBron and Schroeder is not KD, if he's really KD, if he's recovered, Kyrie and James Harden. Those are 2 MVPs plus an all-star plus kind of guy. Lakers don't have that. History will forget the details. Well, they had this nice little piece and that nice little piece. They're going to remember the stars on the Nets. Look what Philadelphia did, though. It looks like Daryl Morey is determined to see if Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid can win a title together. He brings in Seth Curry, who you mentioned in the last block, can shoot the lights out. Brings in Danny Green, legit 3-and-D. Richardson is younger, but in terms of a three-point shooter, Danny Green is better. And so it's not, and they have a GM, obviously, in Daryl Morey, who knows what he's doing, right? They were able to get much closer than they ought to have gotten to a title in Houston because of the team that Morey put together. It wasn't the most talented, but the pieces fit the right way, and the coach knew how to use it. Stephen A., let me ask you something. What happens if you swap out Ben Simmons for James Harden with Joel Embiid? Embiid is a beast. Embiid, when he's healthy, is who really handles that guy, right? You talk about the interior with AD, and AD is the best big in the game if you consider AD a big. Embiid is right there, just not as consistent, but at his height. That dude is giving you 40 and 15 and playing defense, the whole thing. You put Harden on that team, not only do they have a fighting chance to get out of the East, but if they win a title, Stephen A., Harden really will have done something. Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.